Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Are you passionate about creating amazing podcasts? Terrific. You are in the right place. Welcome to Pod Talk, short conversations with podcast creators that are not just about podcasting, because I like to take the scenic route. My guest today is Tracy Hazzard. Welcome, Tracy. How are you this afternoon?
I'm great. I'm excited to talk with you again.
Thank you so much. I'm always like little old me. Nobody wants to talk to me, but whatever. Thanks so much for waiting a year.
I don't think it was a total year since you were on my show. Maybe
Yeah,
5 months or something, but
yeah, something. And I really enjoyed your my guesting on your show was one of the I haven't been doing episodes for like a year. My shows, and I was like, I don't know, should I go back to this? Should I keep going? And then I did a few guestings, and I was like, oh no, I like finished your show, and I like slapped my headphones off, and I'm like, I got to get back to work. So thank you for helping to remind me why I'm insane. I mean, why I love doing this. Before I get too far into the weeds. So Tracy Hazzard has a syndication platform called Poditize. Hey, show notes people, you can click on the link. And I love your tagline, which is your easy button for podcasting. Brilliant. And I'm going to say you're a serial podcaster, and I mean that in the you have a problem way.
I resemble that remark, as my husband always says.
Yes. So at the moment, you have at least two shows that I know of. One of them called The Binge Factor. And I think where I want to start today is, as I mentioned before, I want to talk about The Binge Factor because you were like mid-reboot, as in you've said it out loud, you published the episode, but I ain't seen no reboot yet, Tracy. But we're going to come back to that. But the other show, which I think our podcast, my listeners might be maybe more interested in, is the Feed Your Brand. I got a little lost. I was walking, and like trying to get hit by traffic. I kept stopping and like, oh, I should listen to that one. Oh, I should listen to that one. Oh, I should also listen to that one. So there's a couple of interesting ones where you guys, you and your husband, Tom, do these really interesting deep dives. And what I really like about your deep dives is you guys have actually done the stuff. So if you say, here, this is how email list works if you're a podcaster, or you should have a website, it's like you've done it. Like you've done a show with and without, and you really, I'm making a dough rolling gesture. You really like roll out all the edges of the pie crust. And I think that's really nice. So thanks for doing that. But the Binge Factor. So I'm thinking it was late January, you put out an episode for the Binge Factor that said, we're pivoting, we're rebooting. And I've listened to enough of your stuff. That's not unusual for Tracy to say, we're rebooting.
No, we usually get a little bored every couple of years. So yeah, it is kind of my thing. I'm a designer. So yeah, I got to reboot something.
Well, so what is I'm going to say, what's the thing that surprised you? Like, what's with the holdup? Because I know that it's been a couple of going on like 2 months now since you've known what you wanted to do, but it hasn't come out the play side yet.
So the first change is that Tom's going to join me on the show. So whenever you have two people involved in a show, whenever you have co-hosts, it takes twice as long to do everything, let me tell you. The second change I thought would make it faster. I'm not going to do interviews. We're going to talk about podcasts, but it's more like a movie review, like a podcast review, like a review of the show. But we're calling it the Binge Factor Deconstructed, because what we're doing is we're breaking it apart into the pieces that work or don't work and letting you know what that is, so that if you want to know if it's bingeable or not and you're a listener, you'll know. And if you're a podcaster, you'll know what not to do. And so that's the idea behind the show. So I thought it would be easier that I don't have to schedule interviews. I don't have to get people. I don't have to have appointments. We could just sit down and record these
pre-calls,
shows. Yeah.
Like blanket buds.
But getting all the information and getting the profiles done on these shows, because there's a lot more prep work in it than when I do an interview. When I do an interview, I just would listen to the first episode, the last episode, and one in the middle that I liked. And that was it. And so prep took an hour and a half, and it was just in my head and a few notes and I'm done. But this prep work is a lot more detailed. So we have to check their websites and go through the analysis of the show, listen to see if it's changed over time. Like, it's just taken on this beast of preparation to get enough in the can to get going again. And so that really took me by surprise, actually. So I thought I was making my life easier. I made it harder.
Um, I'm laughing along with you. I continuously have, I call them great ideas. I don't think they're great. I continuously have these great ideas. And then when I start to think through it, I'm like, oh, well, actually, so, and then when I actually start to do it, like, I totally feel that what you're talking about there were what yeah, I do think it's a great idea. And I listened to the episode I mentioned where you were talking about the pivot, and as you were talking about calling it about autopsies, I'm like, oh please don't end on this idea. So deconstructed is brilliant. I'm like, yes, move away from the death, anything other than autopsies. But the deconstructing it is brilliant, and I think when I heard what you were doing, I'm like, well, yeah, that's go do that, and also how do I get you to please do my stuff? That's an awesome idea. I'm wondering, so that's a lot of negative, like you realizing this is going to be harder than you thought. Has there been anything that surprised you on the positive side? Like, whoa, I didn't even think we were going to get to deconstruct this part of it.
So I was surprised at how many people listened to that episode that you're talking about, the sort of
Mm.
reboot and how I named it. And how many people reached out to me and offered up their show. So
Oh.
we usually it's kind of crickets. Like it's just like no one ever reaches out. I'll reach out to them and they'll say yes. Like there's no
Hmm.
question about it, but I have to do the outreach. No one suggests themselves into the Binge Factor show except for PR firms, right? And
Yeah,
so,
the book
right,
junket.
you know,
Like,
they're it's their
nah,
job.
not
But
those
no
people.
one
Like,
individual, yeah, no one comes to it except a bunch of people who don't even have their own show and they think they're submitting guests, random guest submissions to every podcast host on earth. Yeah. And so, yeah, so I was really surprised at people who offered up their show and they would say things like, go ahead and be critical. I was
mm,
like, that's awesome. Because, I mean, I don't like to be mean. I'm not mean and I'm definitely not a person who likes to be contrary, but tends to happen that our advice is against the common thought because people come from this place of giving advice from their personal experience. But when I look at it, because of my background as a designer, I look at it as an experiment. And if it doesn't work for most people, then why am I recommending it?
mm,
And so now, occasionally, though, one on one, I go, there's this great piece of advice that most people shouldn't do, but you should. I love the opportunity to do that. And I said, all
find
of you out
perfect
there,
words.
just plug your ears. Don't listen to this. But here's my advice for this one person because it will work for them because they have a uniqueness, right? That's like such a gift to be able to give that out. And that's what I'm really hoping the show will do. And when somebody opens themselves up to and invites that, that's really amazing.
Hmm. There's a lot to be said for my father and his father. They were both mechanics. Worked on
My
elevators
dad was
all
an
their.
engineer, so
Ugh. And my father used to tell this old, story about like, when he started in the business, which would be like in the 50s or 60s. He would tell a story about an old mechanic, and the lesson the mechanic taught him was this old grizzly guy smoking, cigarettes, and he's got like a bag full of broken tools. You'd think a professional mechanic would have all the, and this guy like dumps the bag out, like there's like candy wrappers, dumps all this crap on the floor. And my dad's like, I mean, really? Like you're a professional. And the takeaway from the story was basically like, kid, anybody can fix it with the right tools, but it takes a professional to fix it with a peach basket full of broken shit. Of course, it's a funny story, but it goes back to a lesson that I think you guys like embody it, but I don't hear you say this a lot, but you embody this idea of, yeah, step one, what are the norms? Like, this is how the broadcast TV industry does openings of intros. That intro tonight, we're having blah, blah, blah. They did that in post-production. Like that, learn the lessons. This is how it's done. And then break the rules when you know why you want to break the rules. I think that's a great piece of the binge factor right here. And I also think Feed Your Brand, they're two separate shows, people, like different feeds, different websites. That appears in both of them. The idea of like, well, here are all the ways you could do it. And here's where we're seeing this working, and here's where we're seeing it not working. You guys are also very clear about defining what success looks like. So I don't know if you want to talk about like how you help people figure out what success
So
is,
what
or
you're saying, we actually just said this yesterday in our coaching call for recording the next episode. And when we were talking about it, we were talking about this idea that we both met at art school. We met our first day at art school. We went to Rhode Island School of Design, and Tom and I went into similar like fields. So his is industrial design, mine's textile design. So we make products together. Like that's just the kind of idea of how
hmm.
we started it working together. way, way, way too long ago. And so anyway, but the design world and art school has something they call freshman foundation. And it's this idea that everybody learns the same no matter what you're going to do in the art field, no matter whether you're going to go into illustration or animation or product design. It doesn't matter. You're going to get this foundation, and it is based on the masters. It's based on drawing, line, structure, form, like all of those things, 3D, 2D, and drawing, all of them. And so once you understand that, now you can layer in tactics, technique, tools like computers, like, when we went to school, CAD, they got a CAD lab.
CAD was fancy.
They got a lab, like that's how long ago we went to school, right? The first computers show up at the school. They didn't even know how to teach it yet. So you get those tools and you start layering them into your process, and then you learn how to break it and make something your own. And that's where your art, your style, your uniqueness comes through. But if you didn't have that foundation, you don't really have a right to jump to those other things. And it just doesn't work out most often. It's a very rare individual that it just works out for them.
And it also strikes me that individual, they didn't even ask any questions. Like right. I went to engineering school, and I'm like, oh yeah, we had the basic electives and all these things. And I was asking questions, but I was mostly going, I don't know, show me where, I'm like following the curriculum, following the instructor, following we're all people like us, go over here. Okay. But that real star, that rock star that you're referring to, yeah, not only did they blaze their own path, they didn't even look around. So it's like, all right, I mean, those people are pretty self-identifying. Like, you're doing that thing. You wouldn't have even thought to ask me for help. So that's an interesting point about noticing maybe which type of person you are.
Early on, my podcast afforded me the opportunity to write for Inc. magazine, and I got an opportunity to interview Steve Wozniak, Apple fame. And Woz is it was like a dream interview for me. I was like, what am I going to ask him? I have so many things I'd like to ask him. I'd like to pick his brain and know stuff. And he gave me way more time than they allotted. Like they were like,
oh, that's great.
But he kept talking, and he was brilliantly fantastic about the whole thing. And we were actually at a blockchain conference, which was such a blockchain and cryptocurrency conference. And I was like, why are you here? Like, what is this about? But what he really said is that innovation and that special something that we're all seeking comes from understanding deeply how something works and then figuring out a new way around it, figuring out a way to get through your vision, your message without using that. And so he has a story in his book where they could only afford so many chips. So he had to figure out a route to make it. And it sped up the machine, and it did all these amazing things, and it afforded all these future things like adding graphics cards and stuff that they could do because they had to solve a problem. But because he deeply understood how it all worked, he could figure out that path. And I thought, that's brilliant. That's what all of us need to know. If we could deeply understand how this is working underneath us, or work with somebody who understands how great it is, right? Then our vision can come across. Our voice really can be heard. And that's a part where I think we don't have to do everything. That's where I think we fall apart, in that we think, well, if I'm not editing my own show, if I'm not putting out my own social media posts, if I'm not writing my own show, if I'm not doing that, then I'm not a real podcaster. And that's just not true. That has nothing, that's mechanics again. That's nothing to do with it. But if you are not taking a look at any of those things, questioning any of those things, not thinking about what's going into it, then you're not a real podcaster, right? You have to, your voice, your original message, your things have to come across. And if you need help to do it, then get help.
Where were you like 9 years ago? Sorry. I mean, I think I dodged a bunch of bullets it's a horrible metaphor. I think I got off lucky. Let's use that one, because I was just having these really cool conversations, and I'd be like walking somewhere with other people, and like, I'm the guy that just cross. I don't know what's over there. I just go like talk to people. So I'd be like talking to people in movement spaces, and there'd be people walking behind us. And somebody actually said to me one day, like, "Wow, you should have recorded that. I'd have listened to that podcast." and I was like, "Huh, maybe." I mean, I know podcasts are a thing, but I wasn't really even a podcast listener at that point. And I think I dodged a lot of pitfalls that way because I was like, "Oh, well, the goal is to hit, publish." Well, how do you do that? Figure that out. Okay. And, like I had a friend, what mic should I use? You use these mics and you need this interface. Okay. Like I just, the definition of done was really clear. Like somebody wants to press play and I just never got sidetracked. And I think today, if you're trying to start out today, I mean, it's as easy as it's ever been, right? Like it's take you 5 minutes to get started. And take you
I
4
always
minutes to
joke.
get distracted, right?
I know. I mean, look, we've been in business a long time. Our very first business, we had to like hard code our own website, like build our own shopping carts. Like,
Right.
I mean, we had like
Manually make
super
the RSS
mistakes.
feed.
Yeah. Like we super like big security mistakes back then. It was just like, if you hit the back button, you'd see the first entry in the database of the person who bought the very first product from us, like that kind of stuff. Like,
Whoops.
because it wasn't secure, it wasn't done right, because it was so difficult. Today, it's so easy. There's so much to do. I mean, I just demoed to an entire group of authors who are writers, right? And I'm a writer too. I demoed how I get my first draft out of AI for them from my podcast. And honestly, I can write an article in 30 minutes. On a normal day, I can write an article in 30 minutes, but I can do this in about 10. I can do 3 times the amount of articles. I can get more of my word out. I can do more. And it's not less special. Like when someone reads it, they cannot tell the difference between the ones I actually wrote and the ones that were AI assisted nowadays. Yeah. It's that good. So there are so many things you could be using to make this easier for yourself. And what you have to figure out, and this is my favorite book of all time is Smart Cuts, Shane Snow. Favorite book. And I love the idea that once you sort of analyze and figure this out, there's a smart cut path that you can take that gets you from here to there fastest. And it gets you the results you want. So what are we cutting out that really still preserves the essence of what we want to accomplish, but makes our life easier? My 2 shows, I just explained to you that I made the Binge Factor Deconstructed more complicated, didn't do what I really needed to do for myself, which is making my life easier, which is why it's taking so long. But it's a better show. It's a more interesting show, and I'm getting more from it. So at the end of the day, I'm very sure I'm going to commit to it, right?
Yeah, you couldn't have done it 10 years ago, right?
I couldn't have.
Maybe you had the idea, but you're like, I don't know what I should be saying, right?
Exactly. Now I can do that. But Feed Your Brand is like autopilot. It's so simple. We run a coaching call live every Wednesday. We invite our clients in. We use it as a lead generator in our AI newsletter that goes out to all the Podcasters United community. And they get a hidden link to be able to come into the live and ask us questions at the end of our recording. And then we pick a topic that we need to cover to make our SEO work and to make the topics so that everyone has these nitty-gritty details. And then it feeds our AI clones. So like it has all this information about how we podcast and our advice so that my next article and the next thing I do and the next piece of advice I give, I don't have to give it. It comes through naturally. So all of that is just working. And all we do is show up for the call and do a small amount of topic planning ahead of time. I think Tom and I prep for those 30 minutes. That's it. We have a chit chat conversation and we write our notes down.
It's 30 minutes only you guys can do, right? Like that's the point. It's like, what's the work that, a lot of times I'm grumbling early in the morning with a cup of coffee, looking at this pile of stuff I lined up for myself. I'm like, okay, all right, okay. What's the work that only I can do is a really important question. And the other one is, what would people miss if I didn't do it? Like that's another really handy one. They don't have the same answers, but what's the work that only I can do? Oh, I got to do updates. There's software that's broken, or I need to fix this feature. And then what would people miss? Well, they would miss me if I didn't ship any episodes. So this should be episode 3. Welcome to episode 3 of season 5 of Pod Talk. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think,
exactly. Where just your brilliance come through, you
yeah,
have to put that in. And so for Tom and I, we've worked together and we, we live together, we work together. He's my husband. So like, I mean, we spend all day together and we live, eat and breathe podcasting. So it's easy for us
yeah.
to have this shorthand of like, hey, I've been thinking about this. And it's likely he's been thinking about it too. Right. And
Do you
so it
find
makes it easy.
do you find a lot of the people that are taking advantage of Podetize or taking advantage of your coaching calls? Are they a lot of what I'm calling like one person? It's a one man, one person band, or are you finding small teams, or like what's it like? What are the kind of people that are actually reaching for the life preserver or the life ring?
So for most of the years of our company, Podetize, we've had about 90% of them are done for you clients. So where we really do everything for them. So they don't want to show up to the calls because they were like, I paid you, so I don't want to show up to them. So they like, unless they have a problem or something, they don't show up. Or unless one of the topics happens to, intrigue them, like we're going to talk about YouTube, which isn't something we do, or,
Hmm.
social media, something, where there's going to be a TikTok conversation, then they'll show up. But so for the most part, we couldn't get anyone to show up to these coaching calls. So they were for the 10% of the people who used our platform to do it themselves. But over time, a lot of those do-it-yourselfers were networks. And so the network people, it would impact a lot of shows if they improved what they did by coming in. So now we tend to be a training ground. So like we get people who come in who are training their staff to run their network better, come into our calls. But the net result is that it started to shift to like 70-30, where we have about 30% of them are DIYers.
Hmm.
And the DIYers, what we've been told by some of them is that we layer things really well for them. So we give them one little bite of something. And then the next week we'll give them another bite of something. And then a month later, because when we are layering in, like we've been layering in things about making your intros and your trailers and all of these things better, we've actually done a couple of episodes each month that are related to it. One was related to music. One was related to the structure of it. We just did then how to make a trailer episode, which is different than an intro. But because we did this, we're building on the knowledge over time. So the ones that are serial and show up again and again, their shows really take off. And it doesn't cost them anymore. It costs them $29 a month. Like
Yeah,
it's
like
like
continuous
nothing, right?
improvement,
And they make continuous improvement, but it's because they're coachable and because they're showing up for themselves and thinking these things through and applying what they can. They're not in permanent potential, as we call it, like where they now they're paralyzed and they can't make any
Yep.
progress.
Analysis paralysis is real. Yeah.
It happens.
Sometimes people, it often happens in real life. Like I run into somebody and they're like, hey, I want to start a podcast. And I used to say, I'm sorry, like, because there's a whole bunch of hurt coming their way no matter what they ask me next. And then they thought that I was pushing back, like, don't talk to me. So I don't say that anymore, even though that's what I'm thinking. But the first thought that I have is, oh, it's a field full of rabbit holes. It's all holes. There's no field. Like you can get lost in a million places. And I think you're like, it's really obvious when you say to like people listening, like, it's really obvious. Yeah. Give us, the potential podcaster, give us the pieces, one piece at a time. And, and then you and I know, yeah, but then I have to get you to show up. Like I have to get you to engage with the material, to listen.
Yeah. And they don't show up. Look, I mean, this is the reality of it. It's like we have some people who are just such dedicated. They show up all the time. They're always there. And their show is always improving. And they are on their way to monetization. And that's what it takes. Like this is the difference between those that can monetize and those that can't, is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Or a lot of money, because I've seen that too. So you just throw a lot of ad dollars at it. So
Yeah,
that does, you have to throw ad dollars
on.
to actually, it's kind of counterintuitive, but you have to throw ad dollars into it to make ad dollars on the other side.
Yeah.
And so, but that's the only way that we've seen it work, is you got to put the work in and it takes time. But when you plug away and you've got a good foundation, it takes off and it really does well. And we've seen some niches that are just like, you wouldn't think they could. Just absolutely wouldn't think they could monetize, and they're out monetizing the most, what you would call the most valuable keywords. So we could out monetize anyone in our very first podcast, which was on 3D printing. We could command like $75 for, a CPM.
KPM or
Yeah,
CPM.
exactly. I mean, it was just like huge dollar amounts because our audience was so valuable, and we wouldn't sell them out. So like we wouldn't book up the space. And so we could really command a lot of money for it, and we could do it at special times and not inundate the audience. And because of that, then they would reward the sponsors. And so it would be a cycle of they rewarded the sponsors, so then the next sponsor wanted in, and they would beg for the space and pay twice as much. And so it really worked out for us, but we had to prove ourselves first. And when we did, it was no question. It was easy.
I mentioned already in this call, I mentioned already that I listened to the episode about the email list question. A lot of podcasters, I would say, go, "Oh yeah, I don't have time for that." No, they just like default know the idea of an email list. Those are often the same people who just kind of node on a website. And I actually think this is where I'm going to draw lines. Like if you don't have a website, you're not podcasting. Like aside from the technology point about it's all run by the web, RSS is fed using the hypertext transfer protocol, which is the web. But aside from the technology nit, if you don't have your own little piece of real estate, what you guys were talking about, and I was like, yes, once more louder for those in the back, was you were talking about what do you own? And yeah, maybe you have engagement on social media, but you also have the problem of I have like 700 followers. I hit publish and like 10% of the people see the post because I don't want to give money to the entity that runs the platform. It's like, I don't actually control or own, and I mean own like in a control sense, not like legally own. I don't actually control that relationship to the people who nominally want to follow me in social media. And email is like, well, maybe SMS messages and things, but email is like the only place where you can even attempt to have access to be able to control that. And a lot of people who run really big email lists also scream and yell that also ends up in junk and like, yeah, but it's better than the other algorithms, which are intentionally trying to withhold that interaction.
Yeah, it's so true.
I guess like web is like, please, web, and
but
then
what
email.
we don't realize is that, and this is the part that it's in one of the many episodes, or many of the episodes, because we touch on it a lot. When we started the Poditized platform, we actually have our web statistics and our podcast statistics. You can flip between the two. So you put your website in and it gives you what is like top level SEMrush, Google Analytics, and it's giving you your keywords, where you're ranking, how your growth is. Because what we found early on was that those with the website grew faster than the listener base that you would get. So you would see your growth first in the website and then second in the listeners. And so it created this opportunity for someone to say, oh, okay, my podcast is doing okay, and not quit so quickly. So for us, it was a way to demo to them that they were making progress. But the interesting part is we have a lot of shows that quit, right? And we know there's a huge pod fade statistics on the planet here. But we can go back and monitor them as long as their feed is still live. We can see the traction that they're still getting. Their website continues to outpace once the podcast stops airing. So the podcast app isn't serving anything up to new people. So your listeners are down, but your website is highly searchable if you've done it right. If you put show notes in, if you've made blogs, if you've made it searchable and used your keywords. And so what we see is that it can last for years after your show ends, that your website traffic still comes through. And then the other difference is when a client will come onto our platform, or a subscriber comes onto our platform and they use that website model, they get 30% more listeners than someone without a website. It's on average. I mean, there's some niches where it's like 50, 60%, but because we underestimate how much search happens, and it's not looking through the RSS feed. Google search doesn't do that.
Right.
So if I've got the blog, someone's finding the blog, and then they're sitting on that page listening, and then it's really easy to hit the subscribe button from there. And the next thing I know, I have a binge listener. It's great. But it starts on that website traffic, and we track that because you can see it on there. But so when somebody looks at their show and they're like, wow, my listens went way up. Well, it went up because this percentage you were never capturing before because you never had a website. Now you do. So.
Yeah, I get really irritated when doing prep work for shows, like your stuff's exceptional. You're easy to find, but sometimes I'm like, I look at a podcast and the podcast is really busy, and like you get like, wow, this is really cool. And then I'm like, okay, so and I'm like, well, where is this? And I type the name of the thing in, and like the first 3 pages off DuckDuckGo, off Google. I'm just like, and it's all Apple and
All
it's
over.
all the platforms, and I'm just like, yes, I get it, but I'm like, where is the horse's mouth? Where's the thing? And
Yeah.
yes, I understand. Like, I've been doing websites since 1993. Yes, I understand. It's annoying when you love your show and the name is a domain name that's not available. Like, yes, the real estate problem is challenging these days. But I think it's worth the effort to find something that makes sense and like get the domain name.
This is what I learned. I learned from a guy who ran 1,000 revenue generating websites. I learned the basics. So when we did our 3D print podcast, I didn't build that website. He did. And I learned from him what he was doing that was so fantastic. He said, we can name your website anything. And he did. He did it to prove me. He didn't name it. Our show was called WTFFF, where FFF is fused filament fabrication, geeky term for 3D printing. And so that was what the show was called. And we had our own website called Has Design for our design firm. And we were just lumped it and we were going to put the blog there. And he said, no, I'm going to create a new one. It's called 3D Start Point. And it has nothing to do with the show name, nothing to do with our business name.
Right.
And I guarantee you we're going to get it to rank. Today, I still get people asking to be a guest on my show. And we published 50 episodes, but we haven't published since 2022. And so, and they still come on the show. They still want to come on the show. They want to advertise on my show. They want to guest
still on that website, right?
Website because everything still ranks.
Yeah.
We still beat out everyone in the 3D print space because of the amount of content and how well.
And the search engines look at the domain registration. When was it registered? And if it was registered like 15 years ago, there's no way to cheat on that, so like, that one's been around a while. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Rank that one up.
Yeah. And so what happened to us in 2020, we had sort of petered out. We were just doing a few, maybe one a quarter. Like we were on the tail end of it. And I get this woman keeps leaving me this email, and I thought it was spam. It was like, this is Hewlett Packard International. Like I thought it was junk, right? Like they were trying to sell me something, right? Sell me another 3D printer. And I was like, we're not buying one. HP's too expensive in my head. And so like, I was like, nope, not going to happen. And so I was ignoring it. She found my calendar on my speaker page and booked a call with me. That's how badly she wanted to get in touch with me. And she says to me, I am with HP and we want to do a podcast and we want to do it with you because we've spent a year trying to get you off the first page of Google. And we can't do it. So we just like to join with you and get ourselves up there ranking with you. And so that's what we did. And we charged them quite a bit of money. And we did a 25 episode limited edition series where we repurposed 12 episodes, rebranded them, and put in new intros. And for us, an intro might be like 10 minutes. So it's like a longer piece because we're introducing the concept. And then we edited through it to make sure everything was still timeless. And then we did 12 interviews with Hewlett Packard people that had never, ever granted interviews before. So we had like exclusive
inside
interviews.
Access. Nice.
And it was the
catalog
coolest,
for the win.
most fun thing we did. And I got paid to do it. Like, it was like, I've done my show for free forever and I got paid to do that. And it was more fun than anything. And then because of the timing, it took us about 6 months to build it. By the time it came out, the pandemic had hit and they desperately needed people to show up on a webinar to sell a printer. And that's what they got. They got tons of traffic from the show, from the limited series to their webinar, sold lots of printers. It was worth every dime they paid. I probably could have charged them twice as much.
Yeah. There's an old lesson about the opportunities show up, but they're not where you think they come from.
Right.
They can't. There's an analect about, the opportunity is going to show up, but it isn't going to come from where you think it's coming from.
That's so true.
I don't think I've ever said this on the air. I have a question about, I tried Seth DeMeo from the Memory Palace. Does a thing he calls in-between-isodes, IN-between, like in between. They're like host on mic, but they're different than his regular show. I experimented with dropping in between episodes on my shows and moving the publication date. So every time I would drop a new episode, I would keep it at number 2. So it was not the newest episode in the feed. So new listeners got an actual episode. And once you, the way it works, if you don't change the global unique identifier in the thing, once somebody listens to that in between episode, yes, it's always number 2, but it doesn't show up as a new one. So I would get like 30 or 40 listens on the in between episode, even though I kept it there for 6 months. I just kept moving it along. So my first question is, have you ever heard anybody else do that? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because it's a bit of work, because you gotta go in and edit the publication dates, and I don't know if it
So
was worth my
if you,
effort.
yeah, I mean, if you don't publish it new, right, then there's no notification system. And for most people who are using their app in a way, that alert is a very important thing. And so that's where it starts to fall apart. This is why if you podcast monthly, it's kind of a waste of time. You really have to podcast at least twice a month in order to keep on top of the push algorithm for that. So what we've been doing with Feed Your Brand is we do these episodes we call Next Up, which is like the teaser for the
Right.
live stream. And so it's really like a commercial, because it's a commercial for join us live if you want this topic right now. And what I'd been experimenting is that essentially when I then publish the live stream a week or so later, I backdate it to the actual live stream date. So people still get it live, but its date is the
date of the actual
that matches
recording.
the actual live stream. So it matches the YouTube video, which is kind of why we do it, because we do YouTube as well. So
How
now
much of,
it has
how
that
much of a
match.
lead? How much of a lead do you do between the Next Step episode and is it like a week in dating?
No, it's 2 days. So we
'Cause
don't
that's
give
what I
them a
was gonna
lot of
ask.
time. Yeah. We don't give them a lot of time. And the only thing we do is actually give them the link at that point to the YouTube, so that what they'll do is they'll hit follow and alert over on the live stream on YouTube. It's just a little easier over there, because if we give them Zoom, they got to log in and then and then follow it.
Yeah.
So it's just more convoluted to do it that way. But we do in the description also. If you want to join us live and ask questions, you can. But that's what we did. Now I'm experimenting with, and that was what yesterday's episode was about. We were talking about trailers and using the show trailer. So we were experimenting with the episode trailer, but it just doesn't work. Like, it's just not good at all. It just doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
Nobody cares.
Which is moving that next up right up against it. So it's the episode trailer. That's because that's kind of what it is. It's a preview of the episode, but it just doesn't work in the same way. But moving the next up to pinned as your trailer episode puts it at the top of most of the apps. And that solves the problem, because new people will see it even and more prominently. But if you publish it new and then pin it, now your existing people also get
See
the
it
alert.
too.
So you get both at the same time.
Just a little bit more legwork, but it sounds like an outsized benefit. I'm always just nervous about, I'm in the weeds, like fiddling with, RSS does this and RSS does that.
I love it. I love RSS. Like, I mean, this is the thing. It's like, it's such a geeky thing. And when I first started, I was like, what is this thing that they're talking about? It's just text. Like, what is it? But it's so flexible compared to everything else we use. You can't change your date on a YouTube video. You can't make an edit and replace it without losing all of your listens. We can hack around that in the RSS space. We do it all the time on our show. We replace out ads, and then the show doesn't change.
Yeah.
I mean, the episode, the audio changes, but nothing else changes about it. It doesn't lose its statistics. So all of those things that are so flexible about RSS, I wish it was like that in social. I wish it was like that on YouTube.
Well, there's a reason it's not like that, because the difference is protocols, which is what RSS is. And it's like, okay, here's how the interchange is done. Here's how the different pieces talk to each other. That's standardized. And no one person can take control of that, versus platforms, which is every platform that people think of when you say social media. And the platforms are not protocols. They're closed. And that's okay.
Wow.
They're platforms. So, all right. So 38 minutes and 57 seconds in or so here. We've covered like 50 things. I knew we were going to do that.
No, that's the way it is.
So I'm just thinking, first of all, I really think people should consider going over to Poditize. And like I said, scroll down. It's in the episode notes. But I'm also thinking What's something, let's do something a little different. Like if you could get people to listen to one episode, not of your shows, nice try. If you could get people to listen to one episode, and maybe it's because it's an exemplary, like you should, or maybe it's a cautionary tale, you should not. But like, what's something that comes to mind that you would point, like the one man band who's all by themselves and they're interested in this kind of stuff? What's something that they should listen to that you think would spark some ideas for them?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question because I have listened to so many shows over
I
the
know.
years.
That's why it's
And so
hard.
few of them stick in your brain. Like they
Yes.
all start to blur together. You know that after you've done a lot of shows, right? The the ones that stick out in my mind are the shows that have fun. So, like, look, Smartless, who couldn't talk about them enough? They are so funny. What I think that they do, and there isn't any one episode that I could identify that they've done, but what they do that I think is so brilliant is that one of the co-hosts, and they're all comedians, right? And so they're professionals at this, but one of them prepares the guest and the others don't know who it is. So they're not prepared to ask questions. So it's very authentic. Like they've created a situation in which it's brilliantly resulting in this, comedy improv, right? Yeah. I mean, and so it makes them shine. That's what's missing in so many shows. So in so many shows that I've done over the years or listened to or been on, and that they don't have anything that really makes that show go, oh, wow, I could only get that from that one person. That's what's really missing most often. Now they're trying to think of what the name of the show is, but there's this one, it was about psychoanalysis. His name is Heath Barnes, Dr. Heath Barnes. And I can't remember what the show name is, but
I'll find it.
Yeah. He had the most brilliant outro. And first off, he would go on his show and he would do characters. Like there was a character of Freud who would do this sort of analysis of you. And then, I mean, it was just like funny and brilliant, but a lot of work. And this is probably why he doesn't have the show anymore. It was a lot of work. But the ending, that brilliant close was like, I'm dating myself, but I know that we're similarly aged. So Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yes.
At the end, and he comes up and he looks at the camera and he said, "You're still here?"
Yeah.
Right? That's what his outro is like. It is the most brilliant outro ever. And that I've never forgotten that's his name because of that.
That's a really hard question I asked you. I think that's a really good answer. A couple of new threads for people to go pull on. Tracy, it was a delight to get a chance to talk to you. It's getting to the point now where I'm getting confused. I'm like, was that your show or my show, or was that the idea?
Which one did we say it on?
Oh, it's terrible to have such great problems. So it was a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you again. Thanks so much for taking the time, and I wish you the best of luck because I really think the Binge Factor Deconstructed, I think, is a brilliant idea. It's a lot of work, but I hope it blows up because that would make the world a better place, I think. So thank you so much.
Thank you.